Welcome back to TrueNAS Tech Talk. RC1 of 2510 is just out around the corner, but Kris and I today are going to talk more about the upcoming Spotlight feature for 26.04. How is that going to work for us? We're going to tackle a bunch of viewer questions to answer the ones that you've sent in, whether it's been through email or through YouTube comments. Stick around. Well, Kris, we're right on the cusp of the launch of 2510 RC1. So far, we've seen a little over 2,000 users adopting the beta, and we've been getting some very good feedback on it. I think we're expecting RC1 to be pretty typical candidate for what we're going to launch later in October as the actual .0 full release. But if you do have a system where you want to sort of validate any of this new functionality, play with it, this is your chance to do so. If you're going to run it, whether you're running the beta or the RC, make sure to get us feedback as soon as you can so we can investigate and deal with any sort of little remaining issues left for .0 in just a few short weeks afterwards. So
it's hard to believe October is like right around the corner. It's like it's launch time. It's here.
I know. It's pumpkins patched, apples cider, people spooked. Here comes fall. So speaking of upcoming things, we had a really good question. We're going to do a lot of questions this episode from Kris Mierzwinski, and I apologize if I've brutalized your name there, about the upcoming Spotlight and Search feature that you teased coming up in Halfmoon next year is 26.04. He says, so is this only for macOS or will it work in Windows Explorer? And I know you've been doing a lot of work on sort of the back end here of the search feature, so maybe we'll just dive right into this and we'll talk quite a bit about sort of not just Spotlight, but how the search functionality, it all works.
Yeah. We're going to do a deep dive here. So let's get right into it. So Spotlight, of course, that's a Mac OS only thing. There is another protocol for Windows called Windows Search Protocol that Samba, our upstream SMB server, does not yet have support for. So that means when this lands in Halfmoon, it will be a Mac OS exclusive functionality for the time being. Of course, that could change in time. We might see Windows Search Protocol get added to Samba. We might contribute it ourselves, assuming there's enough demand for that. So again, make yourself known if that's something you're really interested in. We can always take requests on the forums. There's a nice feature section. Feel free to go and put a feature request in for Windows Search Protocol and vote it up if that's what you'd like to do.
It begs the obvious question here, Kris. Begs the obvious question. Is there a Linux search protocol in there as well?
That not that I'm aware of. I'm trying to think, because this would be well, I'm trying to think. GNOME doesn't do that, I don't think. If anybody else knows, feel free to chime in on the questions here.
Or are there several competing? Are there several
Yeah.
competing search protocols that we need to address?
I would expect on the Linux side, maybe some of your desktop-y clients. So again, it might be GNOME or KDE. Somebody's gonna have to go Google it. I wish I had looked that up before the episode now, Kris. I hadn't gone to query that. But yeah, if KDE, for example, if Dolphin supports Spotlight or Windows Search Protocol, then sure, those would work as well. Off the top of my head, I don't think they do, but I could be proven wrong. Again, maybe go correct me in the comments or point me at links if you do know offhand. But that's a great question. Again, your mileage will vary because I imagine it very greatly depends on which desktop your environment you're running, which file manager, because it's really more of a file manager specific type thing. So again, on Mac, it's going to be Finder, although it is integrated fully through Mac OS now. Spotlight's just kind of baked in. Same thing, Windows, it's a Explorer thing and all that good stuff. But yeah, all that to say, if and when Windows Search Protocol does land in Samba and we bring it to the product, it would be connected to the same index and backend. So just start working the same way that Spotlight will be working in Halfmoon.
Cool.
But
let's talk a little bit about how that's going to work on the back end. So you talked about an indexer here.
Yeah. So we'll kind of give you a high level and we can get in the weeds if we want to go deep here. But to start at a high level, so Spotlight support on Mac OS, for those who aren't using Mac, is basically a search service. So it's how you go and you type a few keywords into your Spotlight search bar, or in Finder, you'll have the find bar, and you get, those near instant results about all these files on your disks, which is very helpful when you're trying to find that PDF or that Google document or that photo or that file you tossed somewhere and you can't remember where you stashed it. But a lot of people don't really stop and think, like, how does that actually happen in the background? So even with, a modern SSD on a MacBook here or something, it's not like that instant result is going through in real time searching your entire drive looking for results. I mean, that's not going to be instant. And in the case of, connected to something like a TrueNAS, it's not instantly searching through tens or hundreds of terabytes of data on demand. I mean, you'd be waiting a really long time if that was the case. SSDs are not. Hard drives, forget it. But even SSDs, like that's a struggle. That's a lot of data to go search through just so you could find that one, picture of your cat or whatever, or the photo you took at the beach, or find that document where you mentioned this keyword. Like that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So how does it work? How do we give users that instant gratification of results in real time that we'd all just demand these days and want? So that's how you end up building a service that front loads all the work with an indexer and a search database. So that means on Halfmoon, you'll have a new background service that gets started when you enable Spotlight support, which of course we had to call TrueSearch. So if you go look, you'll see that running in the background. It is us after all, and we got a brand here we got to stick to. But the service TrueSearch will include both indexing and search functionality. So there's two sides to that coin to make it a complete thing. When it starts up for the first time, what's going to happen is it's going to begin indexing process, which walks the storage system looking at all your SMB shares, or for upcoming web shares, which we'll dive into that in another episode. That's a whole nother topic entirely. But it's looking at all the files on disk so it can build out a local database with information about all the files in question. And I mean information beyond just your file name and path, which, hey, that's great. Sometimes you know exactly what the file name is and you can just put a few characters in, you get it and you're good to go. But you need to do a little deeper introspection of the files too. For example, in the case of images, we want to go read the metadata, the EXIF data, for example, so we can get all those photo tags. You want to look for things that were tagged at this location or might have, these fields set. Great. You need to be able to search that. Or if it's a document or a PDF, we need to take note of that as well. Because in Spotlight, for example, you could say, show me all my PDFs. That's a thing. Or show me all my PDFs that have this keyword in them or this keyword in the file name. That's a thing too. It's all about filtering, right? So we have to build and index all that. Same goes for archive files, audio files, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get the idea. But as you can imagine, this process takes a lot of time and is going to have to run as a background task until it's completed.
Yeah. And that sort of background task, it's not looking at the entire contents of the file. So this isn't like the concept of saying, hey, I want to see at some point, I shot a video and this particular bird flew through the frame. You're not necessarily going to see that because that would be way too complex. But
talk about overkill. Yeah.
I'm sure somebody will ask for that. But we've got this indexer running and you'll be able to sort of do these queries against it, but it's a work in progress. So it's saying you'll only be able to get results for files that it's indexed. It's going to end up in sort of this database, but let's talk a little bit about sort of the size of things here. We've got it's going to depend on the number of files more so than the size of those files. You can have a very long audio that talks about, say being a podcast, and you can describe that podcast fairly quickly in a paragraph or two. We do it every week when we create our video description. But at the same way, you could have a number of very short files that are, music tracks, and those will have, the equal amount of metadata, but much smaller size. So file count is what's really going to determine the size of this DB here, right, Chris?
It's all about file count at the end of the day here. Again, you can have 100 terabytes of video files, which maybe are 5K files. That's going to be a tiny, minuscule index because we're only reading the same small amount of metadata from each of those videos. The file size doesn't matter. But then you can go have that 100 terabytes of photos. Now we're talking millions and millions and millions and millions of files. And all of a sudden your index is just freaking huge. That's a lot of data because each of those small files has, multiple kilobytes of metadata we have to go scrape and add to the index database. So keep that in mind. It is highly, file system dependent, what kind of files you have. And that's what's going to determine how big the index is and also how long it takes to crawl. Because again, I can crawl 100 gigabyte video file at the same speed it takes to crawl, 2 megabyte image.
Exactly.
So keep that in mind.
And, it's going to be dependent as well on what kind of metadata you pull. Like for that video file, you might need to know, some of the same things you do with a photo, but you're covering that, huge multiple gigabytes. You're saying, well, here's the running time, here's the resolution. Maybe if the camera stores it, here's where I shot it and when I shot it. But that's it. And well, that just covered, a couple gigs of file right there. But if you need to do that for every 2 or 3 megs of photo, well, you've just multiplied not just the size of your DB, but the effort the system and the search engine needs to do to pick it all up, scrape it, and dump it back into the DB.
Yeah. Yeah, the
So
amount of work goes up astronomically the more files you have, of course, as you would expect.
yeah, and speaking of more files, so I guess the question is, what's going to happen when people say, okay, I've run this index, it took its time, it scraped everything through, and now I've just, it's been tomorrow. I've, connected my phone back up to Wi-Fi. I set up my, image or something for an image library, and I just dumped that last round of photos on there. Do I have to recrawl my whole file system again here?
Yeah, a couple things to mention. So you can search while indexing is happening. So that's all supported in real time. So while the index is being built, you can send queries, and naturally you're only going to get hits on things that have made it into the index. So if we're walking through, again, you've hit 50 terabytes of 100 terabytes, obviously you're only going to get search results for the things that have been touched. But those real-time events are interesting, and that's something we wanted to add support for as well, because it's really expensive to go, walk the tree and go sift through, again, 100 terabytes of data potentially, or 1 million files every time. So instead, we're responding to Linux file system events as well. So if you're uploading a file, it lands on disk, the TrueSearch program is going to get a notification and say, oh, a new file or directory has appeared. Let me go quickly index that. And if it happens even while it's in the middle of a long-running index operation, we have a priority queue, which stuff's going to get shoved into there. So it goes to the front because we're just going to assume, hey, he's adding files or the user's adding files right now. They may want to be able to search or query or look for those immediately versus maybe legacy historical data. So it's going to prioritize things coming in and then in the background get back to indexing the old data. But again, all in real time, you're allowed to search and you'll get hits and results pretty much as they're added to the database. But no, that's good stuff.
That's definitely, I would say, the best way to do it, because I would assume, hey, when I've thrown some new files on there, they're most likely going to be the ones that I'm going to be querying and saying, hey, where did I just put that file, or what's in there, or how do these files fit into an existing query? So bumping them to the front of the line is a really great way to do it.
That's the right user expectation to set here, because there's nothing more frustrating saying, well, I just put the file uploaded, I walked away, came back a minute later, and I can't find it. What? I just uploaded it. Where'd it go? But
how'd you forget already?
One thing to mention, though, is on Linux, the file system monitor, we use inotify and FS events in the back end, but it's kind of a best effort type system. There are situations where you maybe won't get an event alert, and so we won't see the file being added. There can be some circumstances where the system's under extreme load and the events can't be sent, or too many files got added at once and it's only sending a certain subset of them. So again, there's some edge cases we have to account for. And the way we handle that is, of course, with the indexing, once you do the initial index, that's the heaviest thing you have to do. But then there's a periodic job that can run again in the background to go and re-index the file system, specifically looking just for changes or stragglers that maybe got added when we weren't paying attention or didn't notice. Maybe TrueSearch wasn't running at the time. But the good news is that's often way, way faster than the initial index. For example, if I have an index here that takes 10 hours and we're talking millions and millions of image files, the re-index might take 30 minutes, 40 minutes on my particular system I'm testing here. Because at the end of the day, we're only crawling the file system looking for files that are net new. We don't have to go read and taste and touch every single file all over again. It's mostly just the file's still there. The modification time's still the same. Great. Skip it, move on, look for new things. Which, of course, by the way, if they are modified, we're going to rescan them, because if you uploaded a new version of that, PDF or a Google Doc, a Word doc or something, obviously we want to double check that and make sure we have current information. And then similarly, there's a process that goes the other direction. You have prune operations, which again, we get real-time system events. So if you delete a file, we're going to go and try and clean it up out of the index instantly, right? But there can be, again, occasions where that event doesn't get delivered for some reason. So you'll have a pruner that runs in the background that does the opposite. It walks the index, the database, and then just checks to make sure, okay, is this file still here on disk? It's not. Great. Let me remove it. That way we can, trim and keep that database size down.
Okay. I mean, we've been talking a lot about sort of, databases and maintenance. You're talking about pruning here. So I'll just kind of ask the question that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going, hey, how is this going to impact things? There's some services running. How is this going to impact performance? What have you seen so far in your testing with your little TrueSearch program, that service in there?
So obviously it's still early days. Halfmoon's still a ways out. We got lots of time, so things are subject to change and improvement. But where we're at right now at the moment while we're recording this is I'm actually pretty pleased with it. It's been heavily optimized to be as lean and efficient as possible. Testing on a really small system, we're talking like a mini class type system with a little Ryzen laptop processor. we're seeing less than 4 gig of memory used during all index and operations. Usually it's sitting around 2 gigs for the most part. And that's indexing a pretty heavy workload for a small system like that. We spun it up with 5 million image files, which is kind of like the worst case scenario. And it's a mixture of, HEIC files, PNGs, JPEGs, kind of just a whole gamut. The initial indexing on that system is the longest part of the process, of course, because it has to go touch every single file and read a little bit of data. And it's entirely disk IO bound. So for the test system, again, I'm going to start on the low end first, then we'll optimize up at the high end. On a test system right now with a little 4-wide RAID Z1 SSD pool, we cap out at about 200 files a second indexing rate. Now, you might say, oh, why isn't it faster? Well, actually, it's all entirely pool-based. I just can't get the pool to give me more than that. The actual TrueSearch process, which is the thing doing the indexing, it's kind of sitting there at like 20% utilization, CPU utilization, the memory consumption is very minimal. So there's lots of room still to go if the pool would just give me files faster. So this means if your pool can go faster, you have a beefier system, the indexer is going to go faster as well. But in the coming months, we're going to be doing some additional testing to see, what kind of like maximums we can really push through it. Because at some point, you will hit a bottleneck, and it could be CPU. You got 6 cores, but your pool's crazy fast. At some point, it's just going to take more work to go do the processing and stashing in the database and compacting and all that. But our goal here is to make the indexer capable of scaling up to 1 billion files or more. Now, let me put a big asterisk on this. We're going to pause for just a second here. You guys have heard this before. This is 1 billion in the same way that you have unlimited snapshots on ZFS. There are practical limits to that as well. So while the indexer may be capable of doing that and handling it, at some point it becomes unpractical for you as a user. So what I mean by that is the index database on disk might get too large, and now your searches are taking seconds, tens of seconds, because you have gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of index database to go search through when you run that query. So again, there's going to be some practical limitations as well. And also, if you have 1 billion files and it takes you a month to go index them and it takes you, weeks to read, it's just at some point you're going to say, okay, it's too many to go through in the database. So again, plan accordingly, set your expectations accordingly. If you have a spinning disk pool in particular, and you can't get anywhere near that 200 files a second indexing rate, you're getting like 30 or 50, which might still be decent on a spinning disk pool. Again, temper your expectations, setting them accordingly. Now, you will, of course, the traditional thing, Kris, I know you're going to say it is, well, what about having an SSD on the side? Yes, you should have an SSD for the index database. That should be always where you put the index database, because you do want that to be as snappy as possible. That way, when you go type the first few characters in Spotlight, you're seeing results come in your real time. So that's awesome. But again, how much data can you index in a reasonable amount of time is also based entirely on the pool contents. A spinning disk pool with a petabyte of video data, which is maybe only 20,000 files, totally doable. Absolutely, do it. Not a problem at all. Now, a petabyte pool on spinning disk with all images, well, I got a whole different world of hurt you're about to embark upon. So
you're going to be waiting a while.
That.
You're going to be waiting a while for it to index those for sure. It's, the laws of physics suck. I believe it was John Carmack who said the speed of light sucks. I'm sure he'd have some poor things to say about the speed of magnetic disks as well. It's just a case of you can only get so many IOs out of things that are physically spinning platters of magnetically charged media around. The laws of physics are getting in the way there. SSDs are going to be fast, but it depends entirely on your pool contents. And it might be just fine if you're saying, I've got primarily video data, I got a handful of photos from, personal photography. But if you're a, professional photographer, you got tons of things, you're definitely going to want that SSD pool. And then, probably in that case, make that SSD pool redundant, because if you've spent all this time, creating this index DB, well, the last thing you want to do is have that SSD die and have to rebuild it again, especially if it takes a while. I guess here's a question. I know you talked about, the database is going to get large. I mean, do you need sort of are we going to need an indexer for the index? Are we having an inception moment here?
We're not going that fancy. And before some smartass in the comment mentions that, oh, you can run a Redis distributed database across multiple systems. Like, dude, it's a Spotlight search feature. Like, no, I'm not going to ask somebody to go spin up a cluster just to be able to go search for files and get some instant results in their Mac Finder. Come on, let's be real for a moment. But we do try and do some intelligent things. So again, we're not being completely dumb in how we do this. It's not like you're just having one huge SQLite database that gets massive and it's really inefficient. So we're doing proper things like database sharding and all that good stuff. And there's kind of optimal sizes you want for the shards on disk, because one of the nice things about the search backend is it's highly parallel. So sure, yeah, if you have a bunch of shards, it can go and search through them all in parallel, multiple threads, all that good stuff to keep your total search times down, which is great. But there is a point where it's like too much is too much. So, if you have 8 shards, 10 shards, 50 shards on an SSD, okay, not so bad. Their max size kind of caps out around 300 megs is kind of a sweet spot. Okay, doable. Now you get into hundreds and thousands of shards. Now you're waiting a while again for the searching. There are practical limits here on how far you can go.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like in addition to you trying to get me off of Windows and onto Linux for gaming, I'm going to have to pick up a Mac at some point just to start playing with this stuff, because it sounds like it's going to be really interesting. I mean, if nothing else, I love playing with the new edge of technology, and we're starting to wander it into here. So.
Well, I'm testing it here. I got to say it is convenient because I've been doing a lot of the development work and trying things out and testing. It is convenient to be able to pop up Spotlight and say kind PDF, and here's a couple keywords that I'm looking for. Oh, there it is. It's on my TrueNAS. Yeah, I forgot which directory I put that in 2 years ago. Cool. Like, my memory is not the best. And let's be honest, not all of us organize files as well as we should. I try and do my best, but you accumulate enough data, enough Linux ISOs or whatever over time, and it's tough. Like, we have a photo library going back, 25 years now.
We've all seen the meme of the people with, the whole grid of icons saved on their desktop, and that's how they organize things.
I'm not that bad. I'm much more neat and organized. No. I'm way more organized than that on my systems. But again, when you have a lot of historical data, look, I got photos and they're organized by year and month and all that. And some of them have file names. They've been named specific things. It's challenging to remember. Where did I store that on disk again? What year did we take that vacation?
Yeah.
Is that 2014 or 16? Like, dude, it happens to all of us. Get used to it.
Exactly. And the idea is, like, you could have the most fantastic file system organization level where you're breaking it down by, year, and then subfolders for month and even subfolders for day. But is that going to tell you exactly the, geographic location that photo was taken?
Sure.
Probably not. So, hey, get, once Halfmoon comes along, get TrueSearch going in the back end. You can just search for, hey, when did I take that trip to Paris? And it'll bring up every photo for you and say, this is exactly when it happened. And because it's coming off of TrueNAS, none of those photos are going to be corrupted.
No, it's good stuff. So again, great feature. Glad we got to do a little bit of a deep dive. Hopefully that was interesting. And again, I'm happy to answer questions. If there was something we didn't touch on you want to know, feel free to ask, and we'll do our best. But speaking of questions, we got some more to get into here. And this has got a lot of good questions this week.
Yeah, we've got quite a few this week. So we figured we'd dig in and get a lot of these viewer questions hopping on. So we got one from Andrew R here. He says, hey guys, thanks for the great series on all things TrueNAS. With all of the recent discussion and feature development regarding balancing space allocation across existing and new VDEVs, whether it's with, RAID Z expansion or the ZFS rewrite, he says, I'm wondering if there's a user accessible way to report the current pool allocation of data on a per VDEV level. I'm envisioning something like the colored block map in the old Windows defrag utility. Is this something already present in the ZFS command set, or are we talking about a product enhancement request? And in this case, Andrew, we got a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. It does exist in the underlying command set. You can see it right now if you go to a shell or an SSH session and you do zpool list-v as in Victor. But right now, we don't show this on the web UI, and we definitely don't have it sort of color-coded and that kind of thing. Now, that's potentially something we could look at a product enhancement request for the UI and UX team to say, maybe when we can expose this in the device topology or the health view, especially with sort of that ZFS rewrite command coming out. Seems like this might be a bit of an opportune moment to do this, Kris, as well as for those who are saying, hey, I want to have a special VDEV. This would be a great way to sort of show and indicate, say, hey, this is how full your special VDEV is. You might want to consider adding another one if you've been using this for small files, or, hey, it's, barely been utilized at all. Do you have your settings set correctly? That's a good one. That's a good thought-provoking question here from Andrew.
It's just a matter of when, not if in this case. Again, there's a lot of these things where we look at them and go, absolutely, that's going to happen. It's just which release can we get that into, because everything's competing a bunch of other priorities too.
Yeah. Again, maybe we say, maybe it makes it into Halfmoon. Maybe we have to figure out Icefish was the next one. But yeah, it's certainly something that we'd be interested in looking in. And again, if you're out there in the community and you say, well, I can hack this together. I mean, put a pull request together, throw it up on our GitHub and show us how it would be rendered and say, hey, this is how you can make it work. Plug it in.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look forward to seeing that. Well, next up we got from Jurriaan. So he says, hey, I've been a long time user of TrueNAS and FreeNAS since version 9, with the exception of 10. We don't talk about that here, but no, awesome. I'm glad you've been around that long. That's amazing. Thank you. I'm running 2 machines at home. I have a third one on its way. Good to see. Are there any plans to support Let's Encrypt certificates? I'm running a local ACME server on my network called StepCA, which can be used with the Cert bot tool. Have a custom script that uploads the certificate to my TrueNAS device, but I'd like to have the TrueNAS device manage its own certificates. Thanks in advance. So actually, good timing. I'm glad you asked, Jurriaan. So we'll be talking more about this a little bit more in depth in a new episode here pretty shortly. As a teaser for our friends here, we've kind of hinted at this elsewhere in the podcast and on YouTube, but we'll be launching a companion service soon for TrueNAS, which will ensure that all of your TrueNAS systems get valid certificates from Let's Encrypt without having you to resort to doing all these manual steps to fuss around with the ACME generation by yourself. Of course, if you want to go do that by hand because you have reasons, go for it. I mean, fine. But at the end of the day, it's 2025. We want to get this to where every TrueNAS just has SSL on by default, and the certificate's valid and good, tied to a good host name. So that's going to be coming here very soon. We'll be talking about that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting opportunity to connect your TrueNAS system, we'll say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here's our next question coming in from George. It's kind of a two-parter here. He says, are you guys aware if MinIO can be clustered? He says, even if you can run it on Kubernetes, can you run multiple pods? He also asks about OpenMaxIO and whether or not we're going to include that into our catalog about, as a potential replacement for MinIO with some of the changes that we talked a bit about in previous episodes. So, I mean, I think the short version is, for the first part of the question, can you cluster MinIO? Yes, definitely you can. We have a MinIO app in our Enterprise apps train. So if you go to your catalog options for apps and you choose to enable the Enterprise train, there are options for the UI right through the deployment process. You can actually set up your clustering peers, similar to how you were deploying MinIO as a standard Docker container, which, well, you kind of are in this case.
That's what it is, yeah.
Look it up as it's, there's documentation through there called multi-node setup. And you basically have a single S3 namespace distributed across multiple TrueNAS hosts. And they're all, contributing their own redundant disks to it. And at the top level, you ping off of any one of those hosts and it says, well, I know where all my cluster partners are. And you can have a distributed S3 backend. We actually have some of our customers use this for a big, scale out binary large object or blob storage. And some of them are saying, hey, we want a scale out backup cluster and we're going to target S3 for it. Works pretty well.
Yeah, no, it works well. It's been in the catalog for quite some time now, too. Quite a few people have found it, but go take a look. It's, like I said, there's some great documentation in the TrueNAS docs as well around how to set that up if you just need some hand holding and have never done that, by hand before.
Yeah. Clusters are going to be a little bit more complex than a standalone just by their very nature. So go through those docs, check them out, do it in sort of a test environment of your own first. Don't put anything critical on it until you're really confident that you've got that cluster set up the way you want it. So the second piece of the question was OpenMaxIO. Now, I know we've plugged a couple of different S3 alternatives in there. I think we have Versity, we got Garage, we got Seaweed. I don't know that we have OpenMaxIO yet, Kris. And
no, not that I recall, but it's probably a good addition if somebody wants to go contribute it to the app catalog.
Yeah, it's really just about formatting that the Docker pull request the correct way. So if somebody wants to jump over to github.com/TrueNAS/apps, there's a guidelines there for how you can integrate your existing Docker app into that. Just basically, you're going to fill out sort of some of the formatting, some of the YAML changes for the inputs, and how to set up the web UI for the right prompts. And we could probably get OpenMaxIO into there in the community catalog pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, I look forward to seeing that pull request and see it land. The catalog keeps growing and more cool things are being added all the time.
Absolutely.
Okay. Next up, we have chaosfenix. Really like the update here. One thing I've always wondered is why you use your own IX systems directory for the apps by default. This is fine, but honestly, I don't use it because I have no visibility into anything that goes on there. Personally, I want to see the data sets that are in there so that if app has an issue, I can resolve it instead of wondering why my IX systems volume is so large. I have to figure out where each app, and I need to go to adjust settings. So one thing I'll mention here is that's not a bad observation. A bunch of us internally here kind of feel the same way about it. We've noticed the same. That may be an area we go change in the future as part of some, fit and finish and polish work we do in TrueNAS and in the apps catalog. I personally, just to put my 2 cents in, I'd love to axe it entirely so that all app data just lives on the pool and stays fully visible always. Maybe only have hidden directories for things like cache or temp data, which has no real user serviceability parts. It can be blown away. The system manages it in the background. There's nothing to do there. But yeah, that's on my, I guess, kind of low grade annoyances list that I'd like to go back and see us get cleaned up at some point.
Yeah, it's for things like Docker download cache and stuff. We could leave that in the hidden one.
Yeah.
But I know for quite a few of my apps, I've set up like an apps directory on both my spinning disk and my SSD pool, and I'll sort of create them under there manually. But that is kind of the rub, is that it means you're creating these things manually if you're doing it now. So yeah, I mean, I'm probably
that's
on
what I want to switch to.
Yeah. I'm on team axe it, but let's make sure that we don't make everybody do things manually. Like say, hey, if you want to make your own folder for IX apps or TrueNAS apps or whatever, put it there, point our configuration to that, and maybe we could handle all the creation under there. And then you'll have all the standard UI functionality for setting up your snapshots and your replications and things like that as well.
The right way to do it, Kris, is where we end up probably with what we're already doing, a lot of us manually, which is you end up with an apps directory on your pool by default. And when you go deploy an app, it's just auto-suggesting and filling out those host volume locations. So apps/jellyfin/config or whatever host volumes they need mapped in, we create the data sets on disk for you automatically, much like we do with the IX volumes today. But it just puts them in a known location. And then as long as you give the user the ability to override it and say, actually, I want it over here instead.
Exactly.
Fine. So that's what I expect it will look like someday.
Yeah. Make some sane default choices and let people change them. It's probably a good thing. Maybe we can even let you tag, hey, this is a fast pool, this is a slow pool, and we can do things because with our app packaging, we could even make a mark to say, hey, this, we know, like, for Jellyfin, for example, the cache directory, well, that's ephemeral. You don't have to make that live on permanent storage. So we can say, hey, let's put it in this sort of hidden folder where it can just get blown away. Or maybe you say, do you want to turn this into a memory device by default if you have enough? And make some different options there. We'll see what we can do for that one. But yeah, it's definitely a good observation there from our YouTube listener there, chaosfenix. So we have one little more here from Damien ASMR 922 on YouTube as well. He says, I moved from TrueNAS Core to Scale about a year ago. It's been faster, it's been more stable, and I've had better app functionality. I'm maxing out my 10 gig connection without doing any weird tweaks that I would have had to do on Core. Think of that.
Awesome. Great to hear, Damien. This is a great one to end the show on. But we've heard this type of feedback over the years now. Of course, in the wild, everybody's system in the field can be vastly different. But the general observation, the rule of thumb we've seen is that the TrueNAS Scale or TrueNAS Community Edition, as it's called now, based on Linux, tends to support that much wider range of hardware out of the box, which means you have much better odds of just getting a better performance experience without having to fuss around with things. Again, not going to be 100% true in every case. You'll find the occasional piece of hardware that is more optimized and worked better on Core out of box, but that's a much smaller number. Again, we see the general rule of thumb is it tends to just work better out of box, and that's an area where we always want to improve too. So if you see situations where it's not working optimally, again, you got to let us know, and we'll take a look at it. But no, good to hear. Hopefully others are having that same experience.
Awesome. I think that's it for our questions for today, Kris. I mean, that was quite a good range of them. It's really enjoyable. I enjoyed going back and digging through some of the queries, the questions, whether they're coming in through YouTube comments or email or other forms of social media. So
no, it's
absolutely
good stuff. And don't forget, RC1's coming again over the next week. So I'm sure we'll have more to talk about and hear feedback from people on how that's going. But an exciting time going into October here.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to wrap up our show for today, Kris. Thanks everybody again for watching. As usual, if you have further questions that you'd like us to answer on the show, feel free to email them in, to t3@truenas.com. You can also post them in the YouTube comment section below, or find us on another means of social media, and make sure you address your question to, Kris and Kris. Make sure you please do those usual YouTube things as well. Click on the like button, subscribe to the videos, subscribe to our channel so you get the notifications when we're back on there. And Kris and I will see you next time.